I'm Gerry Tucker. I studied economics at Cambridge from 1975 to 1978 graduation. After Cambridge, I went into accountancy, and as a result of that start, I've had a number of senior finance roles as CFO for public companies or smaller company startups. So primarily now I'm working in the technology space, still as in CFO and senior roles.
Going on from that, we'd just love to know your journey to Cambridge. Take us on that path, please.
So on that path, I went to prep school in Surrey, and then I went to school in Oxford. And the school I went to in Oxford was a grammar school the year before I joined. When I joined, it became a comprehensive school. So part of my journey from school to Cambridge involved going through the comprehensive school education system. In terms of my learning at that school, I was very fortunate because of the recent change from grammar to comprehensive. My learning stream went through the grammar school grade teachers who were interested, who did have an interest in helping you move forward. So the subject I studied at Cambridge was economics, and my economics teacher was very hard on me, very pushy, very much, Gerry, you can achieve more than you're doing now. In addition, my parents were also keen on me going to university. My father had studied at Oxford for a while, and he'd been at Durham. So the academic journey was very much part of where he wanted to see me going. In terms of choosing Cambridge, I was at school in Oxford, and I had some mock interviews at one of the Oxford colleges, and their feedback was if I wanted to go to Oxford, they would gladly have me. So one of the things that did for me as I went through the journey of doing my Cambridge entrance exams and getting through to the admissions and interview stage at Cambridge was that I was relatively relaxed. I had a backup option to go on to, which is to go to Oxford. Preconception about Cambridge and Oxford, for that matter, was when I joined that university, I was going to meet a lot of highly intelligent people. I was going to meet a lot of people who came from wealthier backgrounds, and the comprehensive, the middle class, less well-off people tended not to get to Cambridge for a lot of reasons, one of which was the ambition in their family networks. At school in Oxford, in the comprehensive environment, I'd say a lot of the ambition there was to go and get a job in the local car factory at 16 years old. The group that got pushed onto university and pushed hard academically, school of 1,000, I'd say there are 20, maybe 30 got to university. Oxford and Cambridge, I think I was the only one in my year got to Cambridge. So the background is, worked hard, pushed by teachers from the grammar school stream, pushed hard by my parents to achieve things. In that mix, a little anecdote, in my fifth form, which is you do 2 years of A-level, and fifth form is the year before you do your final A-level exams. I chose the options which included playing sport because I was very good at sport. I played in all the school first teams, and very naturally they wanted me to carry on playing. So one of the options I chose was to do, I think it was religious studies and games. And within about a week of starting that course, the economics teacher came in and dragged me out of that classroom and said, Gerry, you're far better than this. You're not choosing the easy options. You're not a dosser. You can achieve far more than this. So I got pulled into studying economics in my fifth form year. When I arrived at Fitzwilliam, I arrived via the clearing. I'd applied to Sydney, which was what I'd been advised to do. I got a very pleasant letter through just before Christmas from Fitzwilliam College saying they wanted me. So that was celebration time. Happy days. When I arrived at Fitzwilliam College on my first night, we went to our rooms and we were told the rules, and we were all assembled in the bar to wearing our gowns. And we got into this bar, and there's a whole group of people, 100 odd of us, each looking around at everyone else, saying, you're a student at Fitzwilliam Cambridge, you must be really brainy, you must have really intelligent conversation going on. What we found was that the JCR president gave us a more informal talk about how real life worked at Fitz, which was along the lines of the rules say you've got to do certain things. You've got to be in college by 11 o'clock, otherwise you're locked out and reported. He said in practice, the gates left open a bit. In practice, life can go on a little bit easier or more like you've been used to. With that introduction then, in a more informal way, you started talking to people around you, and you quickly realized, hang on, these guys are like me. They've come here expecting everyone to be academic, expecting everyone to talk highbrow stuff all the time. In context then, in that first evening, I looked around that room and there was only me as a black guy. My background has been playing a lot of sport, and it's been playing primarily with a lot of white guys. The context in looking at it and sort of not feeling out of place in that room as the only black guy was, I'd been around sports, and in sports, when you play well, people you're playing against will do everything they can to stop you or put you off your game. That includes fouling you, that includes calling you names, good names, bad names, but everything designed to get into your head and put you off. So I've developed a sort of skin which says, well, I'm here because I'm good enough. I'm on the same pitch as you because I'm good enough to be on that same pitch. I'm in the same college as you because I'm good enough. So that's what I've arrived with. So I didn't arrive there conscious of being the only black guy and saying, well, where are the other black guys around?
So you've touched on being the only black person in a predominantly white space in the sporting context, but maybe in other areas of your Cambridge experience, whether that was in lectures or supervisions, where you were part of the minority, do you feel like that experience was different?
As a part of the minority, I guess in my school context, I went to the boarding school I mentioned at the start, which I went to. I think I was the only black student in that school of 100. When I go on to secondary school, there are more black and Asian people around, but again, still very much a minority. So I've grown up and adjusted to being in that minority. And therefore, what it meant when I got to Cambridge was I did expect to be in the minority in the college, in the lecture environment, on the sporting field, in the social scene as well. I think, I'd kind of grown up with that, and I hadn't looked on that as being anything strange. What I'd looked on it as being was, I'm here on merits on my academic strength. I'm here on merits on my sporting strength. As a social human being, I'm a reasonably social person, so I'll make friends or not, depending on whether I interact with that person, whether I get on with them. It's, to me, that just felt like normal life.
Yeah. And I'm sure maybe the football pitch was one of your favourite spaces to be, but did you have any other spaces in Cambridge that you loved, whether that was physical spaces, societies, or just like hanging out with friends in a kitchen? What were some of your favourite places to be?
The answer is all of those. So I was a member of the Union Society. I loved going to the debates down there, and I really enjoyed some of the social events they put on, whether they were discos or just things like real ale festivals. I also joined the Gourmet Society, and what that comprised of was you'd split up into groups of 10, and you take turns to inviting each other to your different college halls around university. So one of the things that happened for me then was, beyond the group of people I knew at Fitzwilliam, I got to know a lot of other people outside the college circle. And through sports as well, I made friends outside of sports, because a lot of the sports societies had their end of term drinks or dinners or whatever. So again, I socialized around that. On the academic side, you got partnered up with 2 or 3 people for supervisions. So those are the people you worked closely with, and you enjoyed being with, because come the end of the lecture, your essays are set, and there's, I think, 2 or 3 books that you'd need. So between you, you'd sort of try and find the books and then share those books to do your supervisions, do your essays. There used to be a weekly university disco down at, we called it the Grad Pad. It's the graduate centre down by the river near Queens. So used to enjoy that. So fundamentally for me, my space wasn't just the sports pitch. It was socially around the college, socially around the university. And so that's the type of person I was, and still am, I hope.
Yeah, it sounds like you got a lot out of your experience joining lots of different societies and obviously meeting people all around Cambridge. In mine and Leona's experience at Cambridge, a lot of cultural societies have really shaped our experiences so far. So like the African Caribbean Society, the BME campaign. It would be interesting to hear if anything like that existed when you were at Cambridge, and if you ever felt like getting involved in any of those.
Yeah, I'm not sure that anything like that existed. There were Afro-Caribbean societies, so I was a member of that. It wasn't necessarily pushing any causes as such. It was more of a social thing. In that social context, I was also a member of the Welsh Society, the Mabinogi. I became a member of that because one of the guys I played rugby with said, "Gerry, can you come and play rugby for the Welsh Society?" So, yeah, I play rugby. I went, I played, I became a Welshman. so it's one of those things. But outside my university life, as I mentioned earlier, I'll repeat again, my father was involved in the Commission for Racial Equality. So his work and daytime was actually going around trying to get justice for Black youths who are subject to stop and search, some quite unreasonable behaviours by the police and society during the 70s. So he was involved in a lot of work to try and get those things right. I think in some ways, to my shame, the work my father was doing was great work for the race relations sector in the UK. But some of the things he was addressing were things I never experienced personally. And some of the reasons I never experienced them was when you arrive somewhere and you play good sport, you're suddenly one of our friends. You're suddenly, we respect you wherever you are, whatever you do. Found that through school, junior level, senior level, university. Through the sport, I gained entrance and admission to a lot of different societies, which if I'd arrived as an academic only SWAT, I'd have been excluded from a lot of things. Never mind the colour thing, I'd have been just excluded. And that's the feeling I got. I also got the feeling that there were quite a lot of lonely people in Cambridge, because I think primarily their life was around their studies, not getting out meeting people, and that can have an impact on you no matter your ethnic origins.
Yeah, definitely. I think that takes us quite nicely onto our next section of activism. So it would be nice to hear a bit more about how maybe your father's work impacted you in the more broad sense.
Yeah, I think in the broader sense, the impact on me has been when you meet people for the first time, there's an assumption about who you are and what you do. So I've met people, the type of people who get picked on and bullied because of the way their first response to things. What I found in the work my father was doing was there are a lot of youths whose first response to things was, "You're picking on me because I don't think I'm as good as you because." So some of the work he was doing was to try and engender in people this sense of, you are worth something, you're worth a lot, you've got an opinion which is valid, and you have every right to be here where you are. So I think in my education and upbringing, I was fortunate to be able to build that resilience, which says your first response isn't about what you've done wrong. Your first response is, I deserve to be here, and I'm right, and I have a valid opinion. So a little anecdote along those lines, I was sitting with a group of students at Newnham in a room, social event, very much a minority. Someone said to me, "Gerry, you've come from comprehensive school?" I said, "Yep." "You're Black?" "Yep." "How come you got to Cambridge?" I said, "Well, there's a secret behind this. I'm probably far more intelligent than you guys around here." That's how I did it.
Love that.
Perfect response.
Yeah, but the point is, in that room, there were intelligent people there. There were intelligent people who'd had no experience of other ethnicities. A lot of them were from privileged public school backgrounds, which meant that their public school will railroad them into Cambridge and Oxbridge. It will railroad them into careers in their dad's merchant bank or into politics, because that's the path that sets for them. What I understood and recognized early on is, don't be shy about expressing who you are, because that takes you a long way. If you want something, you will have adversity on your way to it, but it's a case of perseverance to get there. So perseverance means that sometimes you take shit, but you ignore that shit and say, yeah, I can move on beyond this.
I think that's an amazing way to look at things. And yeah, sometimes it can get difficult and tiring, but I think it's important that we all remember that we got in for a reason, or wherever we are in life, and that we have to hold that value. Of course, a lot of the time we talk about like the Cambridge bubble, but of course Cambridge is going to have the same issues that the vast majority of UK society has. So did any of those issues ever affect your time in Cambridge? Or
Yeah, the main issues at the time. It's hard to put a finger on it, because I think issue number one wasn't necessarily about ethnicity, but it did overlay into that. And it was the town versus gown bit.
Mhm.
In the gown bit, you're respected as a student, and I think a majority of the time you're treated as, you know, a roughly equal. On the town side of life, yeah, just another black kid, and worse, he's a student. I think at the time I was there, one of the big issues was about students and the communism, and, you know, the protests and demonstrations against left versus right. Those types of issues were rising. On the right-wing end of politics, then if you're ethnic minority, then you're worth nothing. And this is not that long after Enoch Powell's series of speeches about, you know, the rivers of blood, this sort of thing. So the politics I tended to stay away from, because actually my politics is about people and making sure people are able to feed themselves and have the opportunities to do that for themselves. The economics I learned about at Cambridge was about keeping people in employment, in jobs. The monetarist free market stuff, which came about with Thatcher and beyond that, wasn't my school of thinking, because that's very much if you're rich and if you've got the connections and you've already got money, you're going to do very well. The rest of you, no matter what ethnicity, tough.
Yeah.
The issues then, yeah, the race issue was big and large back then. So you had TV programs which these days are seen as totally forget it. So growing up in the 60s with my parents, we used to watch Alf Garnett. We used to watch things like On the Buses and Love Thy Neighbor. Totally politically incorrect in these days' terms. But that's what you grew up with, which is the background of societal values which don't necessarily fly today.
I think that's really nice to see the context, and of course things are always changing in Cambridge, but it's nice to have that backdrop as well to put everything in context.
Well, thank you for what you've shared with us so far. I think my next question is just more about role models and mentorship throughout Cambridge. So were there any Black students during your time at Cambridge that you kind of looked up to or helped you navigate Cambridge, or you're inspired by? And this could be while you were there, it could be as part of your friendship group, or maybe looking back.
Yeah, so looking back on my time at Cambridge, I think one guy who was an inspiration to me and role model in some ways was a guy called Ken Olisa. He's now
Our library's named after him.
So in my time there, some of the other students in my corridor had known him. He left the year before I arrived. Some of the other students around Fitz knew him, and they spoke wonderful things about Ken. During my time at Cambridge, and yeah, quite a bit since. Not as much these days because he's a busy man. But yeah, Ken Olisa was an inspiration. And then when I look around the university on the sports field, there are a couple of other African guys I met as well. And again, they were role models. Other types of role models, from the work my dad was doing, I think that was a sort of role model as well. So during my time at Cambridge, I went on a trip with him to one of his conferences, which is down in Strasbourg, and it's about human rights and, you know, race and ethnicity. And I arrived there and I sat through the conference, really hearing firsthand about the experiences that minorities were receiving around Europe. The conference finished and we needed to get from Strasbourg to Germany. And we didn't have the right visas in our passports to get through. So the German border guard said, "Oh yeah, I know who you are. And yeah, just give me a second, I'm going to help you here." And he hand drew a visa to get us from France into Germany. And when we arrived at the other end of the border crossing, he'd already called up his friend and said, "Oh yeah, I had to draw up a visa for them by then. Is that okay?" He said, "Yeah." So that experience for me says, yeah, if you approach people in the right way, you'll get a good answer in terms of doing you a favor, in terms of helping you out. So role model is for me has been very much treat people the way you'd like them to treat you. If I come at you with a really bad attitude, I shouldn't be surprised if you give me a bad attitude back. So that's another thing I learned, which was the people who got the best responses from me were the ones who came at me with a sort of, hey, Gerry, how you doing? And I give a friendly response back. If you come at me with a really bad attitude, and again, I learned this from some of the role models there, then guess what? You get no answer, no one goes forward.
Those people sound super inspiring. And actually, I heard Sir Kenalisa speak at an event recently, and it was really, really interesting. I think we should move on now to like the change part of things. And I wanted to ask you if there's anything that you never thought would change in Cambridge but has, or something you're surprised has changed now.
One of the early forms of changes that I saw in my time at college was the admission of women, more and more women, into university and into the college environment. So I was on the JMA that passed the vote to admit women to Fitzwilliam.
Wow.
So about a year or 2 years after I left, the first women undergrads came to Fitzwilliam. So when I first arrived, it was one of these things which looks like an impossible dream, never going to happen. In my time at Fitz, we could see the likes of Johns and Trinity had all the wealth and all the riches and everything going on for them. Fitzwilliam was very much the poor relative. And for years and years and years, the Grove area used to be a fenced-off garden which belonged to a private individual, an old lady. Through my time there, we kept getting promised, oh yeah, when she dies, the land will come to Fitz and we can expand the college. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's never going to happen. It would have been about 100 by the time I left. But she lived a good long life. But as a result of that, we've expanded the college to make it into a more enjoyable space to be in. In addition to that, I think the alumni societies have done really fantastic work with getting the alumni who've done well financially to come back and support the college and come back and be part of the college and share their experiences. So it's kind of hard to see, apart from those things, it's hard to see any radical changes. And I'm saying it's hard in the context that things have changed, but I get invited back to Fitz 2 or 3 times a year to play in former students against current students sports games. So I've actually had a view of Fitz, every year, most years for the last 20 years, 2 or 3 times a year. So when you're with someone all the time and they change, if you see them once and then you see them again 10 years later, you say, wow, have you changed? If you see them every other day, it kind of slips by you.
So just on that topic, I mean, the Grove is like one of the nicest places in Fitz. So I absolutely love it. I'm just there all the time. I think something that would be really interesting to delve deeper into is the admission of women. I mean, we wouldn't be here without that. So if you could just give us a bit more information of like how that happened and what your role specifically was in that.
Yeah, on the admission of women, there'd been some motions floating around the university which said, we need to have more women in the university. We had, I think it was 4 colleges which were all female. So it was Newnham, Girton, Newhall, and I can't remember what the other one was. I think King's was a mixed college at that time, but that was a total exception. So one of the political moves that was going around back then was you need more rights for women, and that included education. You need more rights for women, which included admission to some of the top universities. This had been discussed by the fellows, and with the JMA, there are further discussions about what would it be like to have more women at Fitz and what changes would you need to have? So when I was at Fitz, it was very much a male-oriented sports club, call it that. So the idea of having women was an interesting one insofar as you're thinking, well, what would need to change? We need to change the changing rooms, we need to change the bar, we need to change a lot of things to accommodate women. And some of the things that changed as well were the rooms you have, it used to be called D block in my time, but some of the older sections of college, you had shared bathrooms, 1 shower room, 1 bath for 8 students, and your room had a wardrobe and a bed and a desk. So pretty
Pretty
Spartan.
much the same.
No, it's not pretty much the same. I've stayed in some of the newer rooms and they're just unbelievably luxurious for the student. So it's then looking at these changes and what impact that has, because one of the things going through Fitz as well was, we need to become more academically oriented. We need better exam results. And, there's a belief that females bring more academic achievement compared to the males we had. That whole debate was going on in the background, I think, for 2 years, and eventually got to a point where the JCR and the JMA were in a position to put this to the vote. So we dropped a resolution which said, this college believes in the admission of women to Fitzwilliam.
That's amazing. Thank you.
And we've just celebrated 40 years of Women at Fitz as well.
Gives away my age, doesn't it?
It's amazing that you shared that with us. And looking forward into the future, what is one thing, or maybe a couple of things if you have them, that you'd like to see change about Cambridge? So this could be Fitz specific, Cambridge more broadly, but anything that you'd like to see change.
Cambridge more broadly, it's got to become a more inclusive institution. I think some of the ways that exams and admission policies work, there's a built-in bias towards certain groups of people. That's been there. I don't know how you get away from that. So if I look at my own life since Cambridge, I've known some women who describe their school days as being labelled thick. Thick means they weren't academically intelligent. They've done an Open University degree since and come out with firsts. So that means that, what the school view of you is, and therefore what's determining your future in terms of university admission, it's not right just yet. And I don't know how you bring out that sort of intelligence in people, which will get you through the barriers to admission to get you into institutions like Cambridge. I remember speaking to one of the tutors about admissions policies, and what they're saying was, it's very hard to pick and choose who should come to Cambridge. These days, everyone comes to you with A stars, 4 A stars, not just one, but 4 A stars. And the question then is, well, how do you narrow down and select the type of person who would thrive? But what it still feels like is it's like when you're creating artificial intelligence, the built-in biases are there right from the start, and the biases are those of the person who's writing the coding to determine that. Yeah, and I don't know that you can accelerate the passage of time, because it's a passage of time which says you move from one attitude to a different attitude. And acceleration feels uncomfortable, and when people feel uncomfortable, they go back into their shells and they stop doing what they're doing, which is improving life, making life more diverse. So that's a tough one. We've moved from a scenario where people used to get education paid for by the state, depending on means, to one where everybody in theory pays the same, but that also carries a bias with it. And the bias is, if you're wealthy, then you can have a £50,000 loan, student loan, no biggie. If you're less wealthy, and if your upbringing says, I need to spend what I can earn and repay, then hey, guess what? You're not going to go to university. You're not going to take the student loan. You're not going to get that education, which means you're not going to have the ways of progressing. So there needs to be some sort of way of addressing that. And I don't think what's going on now is perfect in terms of addressing that inequality caused by wealth.
Definitely agree, and that's amazing points that you've raised. I think especially because Cambridge is so based on tradition, that they sometimes find it difficult to change some of those things. So like, even when students are pooled, they don't take into account that accommodation can be very, very different at different colleges. So I really hope also that is something that will change.
Yeah, but I think the point I made, and which you've echoed, is on the tradition. How do you change tradition? And it changes by passage of time. It doesn't change overnight.
So you've mentioned your economics teacher and also figures like Ken Alyssa. I think it would be interesting to know if you have been a mentor to people, if you've had the opportunity to do that, and if not, if you've had other mentors that have been important.
Yeah, the answer is yes, I have been a mentor to people. And some of it, to me, feels like tough love. And it's tough love in the sense that I grew up in a hard world. Things happened which you needed to just brace yourself and get over. and move on. So some of the mentoring I did was, there's a friend of mine who said, oh, Gerry, I'm doing this work with underprivileged kids. They're age 16 years old. Can you come and give a talk to them and lectures? So I've done that a few times with students. What underprivileged tends to mean is, it tends to mean that they're from ethnic minorities. So one of the things I'm doing is just stand up and saying, I didn't come from exactly where you came from, so I can't relate to you in exactly that way, but here are some of the challenges I've had in getting from where you're sitting to where I am now. And these are some things I've had to go through. And this is how I've overcome some of those things. Some of the things, no easy solutions. So I've given examples of where I've been driving along, being stopped by the police. Remember the points I made about, give a good response to first question and you get a good response back. So, can I help you, sir? Where are you going? And you tell them, and it's a very polite response, because I fully understand that if I go off on a tirade of abusive language, I'm going to end up in the cells a day, 2 days. So the lesson there is, that they're not right. That what they're doing is not right, but don't give them an excuse to do anything worse to you. Yeah. So bite your tongue sometimes. Being active and being loud and being angry about stuff sometimes doesn't take you forward to a place where you want to be. That's kind of one lesson I'm saying, which is the world we're living in now isn't perfect. The world we're living in now isn't going to come offering you justice every time. The world you're living in now isn't going to give you favors, but here's some favors you can do for yourself. It's about occasionally biting your tongue, not all the time, but there are times and places where you give out your opinions. Again, it's going to take some while to get the right sort of justice in the world. And if you look at what's happening in the USA, it's a terrible, terrible scenario that's going in there, but that's existed for 100 years. What's surfacing now is that social media is making it more apparent to a wider audience, more apparent to the whole wide world that that's what's going on. And so the Black Lives Matter movements are saying to the world, this shit's been going on for a while. It needs to stop. So mentoring, it's along the lines of, there are certain ways of doing things to achieve your goals. Yeah, and taking up arms, taking up line cudgels isn't always the most effective way. Sometimes it is, but there are also other ways of approaching solutions to a problem.
I think there's a lot to sort of digest there, but I think maybe on a lighter note or not, do you have any anecdotes of your time at Cambridge that you'd like to share?
More anecdotes. I'm just trying to think of one that's more interesting. I guess Fitzwilliam back then was one of these places, poorer college. So Sunday night you didn't get a meal. So on Sunday night, groups of you, 5, 10, whatever, took a walk into town to find a restaurant to eat at. Poor students couldn't necessarily afford the best restaurants, but there's one place we all went to regularly, which was just off the market square. So we'd go there, we'd have our meals together, and that was the Sunday routine. We'd then try and get into one of the college bars in town, so King's or Queen's or whatever. A lot of the times we're accepted, as a Fitzwilliam group. Other times it was a case of, your guys were in here last week, we're not having you back, your yobs and hooligans, go away. So Cambridge, then Fitzwilliam, it was a tight college spirit. So it was Fitzwilliam against the rest. We grouped together, we were very supportive of each other. And if you're out in town and you see a guy in your Fitz scarf getting into a problem, you're going to help him. That's the first thing you did.
That's great to hear. And I think especially because Fitz is quite far out from the town centre, a lot of the hill colleges kind of stick together, and I feel like there is that kind of sense of community at Fitz, just simply because of the distance from the rest of the colleges as well.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's funny how there's still the same things on that hill and just everything.